While hiking through a remote mountain trail, a man's dog begins furiously digging at an odd mound of earth. Moments later, metal wings and a faded insignia emerge, the wreckage of a long-lost warplane buried for decades. Inside are sealed crates, logbooks, and evidence of a mission erased from history. What started as an ordinary hike turns into the unearthing of a military secret that stuns veterans, historians, and the entire nation. The discovery would challenge everything the public knew about World War II operations. Secret documents revealed classified missions that never made it into history books. Military experts examined the wreckage with growing amazement, unable to explain how such an important aircraft had remained hidden for so long. But what was the real reason this plane was buried instead of recovered like other wartime crashes? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Tom Bradley had always believed that the best discoveries came when you weren't looking for them. At 52, he'd spent enough weekends hiking the remote trails of Montana to know that the mountains held secrets. What he hadn't expected was that his German shepherd, Rex, would literally dig up one of the biggest secrets of the 20th century. The October morning had started like countless others. Tom loaded his day pack with water, trail mix, and his camera, while Rex bounced around the kitchen with the excited energy of a dog who knew adventure was coming. They'd chosen the Elkhorn Ridge Trail, a moderately challenging path that wound through dense pine forests before opening onto spectacular mountain vistas. 3 hours into their hike, Rex suddenly stopped dead in his tracks. His ears perked forward, and his nose worked furiously at the air. Without warning, the normally obedient dog bolted off the trail and began digging frantically at what appeared to be nothing more than a slight rise in the forest floor. "Rex, get back here," Tom called, but the dog was possessed. Dirt flew in all directions as Rex's powerful paws worked deeper into the earth. Tom approached, expecting to find the remains of some unfortunate woodland creature that had captured his dog's attention. Instead, his hiking boots struck something solid and metallic. Kneeling beside the increasingly excited Rex, Tom brushed away loose soil and pine needles. What he uncovered made his breath catch in his throat. Emerging from decades of accumulated earth was a section of riveted aluminum, painted in faded olive drab. Even more startling was the partially visible star and bar insignia of the United States Army Air Forces. Tom's background as an amateur military historian kicked in immediately. The paint scheme, the construction style, the size of the rivets, everything suggested a World War II-era aircraft. But that was impossible. This section of Montana was hundreds of miles from any known crash sites. He'd studied the records extensively as part of his hobby, documenting the history of military aviation in the region. Working carefully, Tom began enlarging the excavation. Rex seemed to understand the importance of the moment and settled down to watch, his tail wagging with satisfaction at having made such a momentous discovery. As more of the aircraft became visible, Tom realized they'd uncovered part of a wing structure. The metal was remarkably well preserved, protected by the dry mountain soil and dense forest canopy. 20 minutes of careful digging revealed something that made Tom's hands shake. Protruding from what appeared to be the cockpit area was a corner of brown leather, worn but intact. With the reverence of someone handling a religious artifact, Tom worked the object free from the surrounding earth. It was a pilot's logbook, sealed in a waterproof leather case that had somehow survived nearly 8 decades underground. The brass fittings were green with age, but the case itself remained structurally sound. Tom's fingers trembled as he worked the ancient clasps, knowing that whatever lay inside might rewrite history. The logbook fell open to entries dated September 1944. The handwriting was precise, the ink faded, but legible. Flight Lieutenant James Morrison, serial number etched clearly at the top of each page. Tom read the final entries with growing amazement. References to package delivery to Pacific Theater and route classified, destroy this log if compromised, filled the pages. But it was the final entry that made Tom sit back on his heels in shock. September 15th, 1944, mission abort. Package compromised. Following Protocol 7, God help us all. JM Protocol 7. Tom had never encountered that reference in any of his historical research, and he'd read extensively about World War II aviation operations. Whatever Protocol 7 entailed, it had apparently resulted in this aircraft being buried in a remote Montana forest, with its crew and cargo still aboard. Tom photographed every page of the logbook with his digital camera, ensuring he had complete documentation before anything could disappear. His years of amateur research had taught him to be thorough and to preserve evidence immediately. He'd read too many stories about important historical discoveries that had subsequently vanished into government archives, never to be seen again. As he carefully returned the logbook to its protective case, Tom noticed something else protruding from the cockpit area. Two metal chains, the kind used for military identification tags. With growing excitement and a deepening sense of historical responsibility, Tom began the delicate process of excavating what might be the remains of the crew. Rex maintained his vigil, occasionally padding over to sniff at the newly uncovered artifacts before returning to his position as guardian of the site. Somehow the intelligent dog seemed to understand that they'd stumbled upon something far more significant than a routine hiking adventure. The late afternoon sun was filtering through the pine trees when Tom finally stood back to survey their discovery. What had started as a peaceful day hike had become the most important archaeological find of his lifetime. But even as excitement coursed through him, a nagging worry began to form in the back of his mind. If this aircraft had been buried deliberately, as the evidence suggested, then someone had gone to great lengths to ensure it remained hidden. And if that someone had been willing to bury an entire military aircraft with its crew, they might not appreciate an amateur historian and his dog undoing 8 decades of careful concealment. Tom's hands were steady as he photographed the dog tags, but his mind raced with implications. The names etched into the metal told a story that contradicted everything he thought he knew about World War II aviation records. Staff Sergeant Robert Chen and Technical Sergeant Michael Volkov. Neither name appeared in any casualty lists he'd ever studied, and Tom had spent years compiling comprehensive databases of Montana aviation incidents. The discovery demanded immediate action, but Tom found himself hesitating. His amateur historian instincts warred with a growing sense that this find was too significant for local authorities. Still, proper protocol required notification, and Tom had always been a man who followed rules. He pulled out his satellite phone, a necessity for hiking in remote areas where cell coverage was non-existent. The first call went to the Glacier County Sheriff's Office. Sheriff Martinez speaking. "Sheriff, this is Tom Bradley. I'm calling to report the discovery of what appears to be a World War II military aircraft crash site in the Elkhorn Ridge area." A pause. "Tom, did you say aircraft crash site?" "Yes, sir. My dog uncovered it during our hike. There are human remains, military identification, and what appears to be classified documentation, Tom. I know you're serious about your history research, but are you certain this isn't just some old farm equipment or hunting cabin debris?" Tom looked at the clearly visible star and bar insignia and the pilot's logbook in his hands. "Sheriff, I'm looking at United States Army Air Force's markings and military dog tags dated 1944. This is definitely a military aircraft." Another pause, longer this time. "Tom, I need you to stay exactly where you are. Don't disturb anything else, and don't let anyone else near the site. I'm calling this in to the appropriate federal authorities immediately." The line went dead, leaving Tom with the distinct impression that Sheriff Martinez knew more about proper procedures for this type of discovery than his tone had initially suggested. While waiting for official response, Tom contacted the Montana Historical Society, hoping to reach someone who might provide context for his discovery. Dr. Elizabeth Warren, the Society's military history specialist. Entered on the second ring. Dr. Warren, this is Tom Bradley. I'm calling about a potential World War II aircraft discovery in Glacier County. Mr. Bradley, I'm familiar with your work on regional aviation history. What type of discovery are you reporting? Tom described the site, the aircraft markings, and the mysterious logbook entries. Dr. Warren's responses grew increasingly terse as he provided details. Mr. Bradley, I need to advise you that certain military aircraft discoveries fall under federal jurisdiction immediately upon identification. You should not remove anything from the site, and you should document everything thoroughly before authorities arrive. Dr. Warren, do you know anything about something called Protocol 7? The silence stretched so long that Tom wondered if the connection had failed. Mr. Bradley, where exactly did you encounter that reference? It's mentioned in pilot's logbook as the reason for mission abort. Mr. Bradley, I strongly advise you to photograph everything at that site immediately and to make backup copies of all documentation. Store those copies in multiple secure locations before anyone else arrives. The urgency in her voice sent a chill down Tom's spine. Dr. Warren, is there something you're not telling me? Mr. Bradley, there are certain World War II operations that remain classified after all these decades. If you've discovered evidence of one of those operations, the historical significance could be enormous. But so could the efforts to suppress that information. Tom was photographing the dog tags when he heard the distant sound of helicopter rotors. Within minutes, 3 black helicopters appeared over the forest canopy, circling the area before landing in a nearby clearing. Rex growled low in his throat, sensing the tension that had suddenly filled the peaceful mountain air. The first people to reach the site weren't local law enforcement. They wore dark suits and carried federal credentials, moving with the purposeful efficiency of people accustomed to controlling situations. The lead agent, a stern woman in her 40s, approached Tom with barely concealed impatience. Mr. Bradley, I'm Agent Patricia Holmes, Department of Defense. We need you to step away from this site immediately. Agent Holmes, I'm the one who discovered and reported this crash site. I have every right to be here. Mr. Bradley, this site is now under federal jurisdiction. Any artifacts, documentation, or photographic evidence you may have obtained must be surrendered immediately. Tom felt the weight of his camera and the backup memory cards he'd had the foresight to store in his hiking pack. Dr. Warren's warning about making copies suddenly seemed prophetic. Agent Holmes, what can you tell me about the aircraft and crew? These men deserve proper recognition for their service. Mr. Bradley, I can tell you that this matter involves ongoing national security considerations. Your cooperation in maintaining discretion about this discovery would be appreciated. Tom looked around the site, noting how quickly the federal team had arrived and how prepared they seemed for this exact type of discovery. Their efficiency suggested this wasn't their first encounter with buried military aircraft. Agent Holmes, how did you respond so quickly to a discovery in such a remote location? Agent Holmes exchanged glances with her colleagues before responding. Mr. Bradley, certain areas of federal land are monitored for various security reasons. Your satellite phone call triggered automatic response protocols. Tom realized with growing unease that his remote hiking location might not have been as isolated as he'd believed. The federal response team's rapid arrival and obvious familiarity with the site suggested a level of ongoing surveillance that raised troubling questions about what else might be hidden in these mountains. Agent Holmes gestured toward a folding table that her team had somehow materialized in the forest clearing. Mr. Bradley, we need you to surrender all photographic equipment, memory cards, and any documentation you may have removed from the crash site. Tom's grip tightened on his camera bag. Agent Holmes, I understand this is federal jurisdiction, but as the discoverer of this site, don't I have any rights to document what I've found? Mr. Bradley, you have the right to cooperate with a federal investigation or to be detained for interfering with national security operations. Those are your options. Rex sensed the mounting tension and positioned himself protectively beside Tom's leg. The federal agents spread out around the crash site with practiced efficiency, erecting barriers and establishing a perimeter that effectively isolated Tom from his own discovery. While Agent Holmes maintained her intimidating presence, Tom noticed one of her colleagues working near the exposed cockpit area. The agent was photographing something that appeared to be a manila envelope, partially visible beneath the pilot's seat. Tom strained to see what had captured the federal agent's attention. The envelope looked different from the pilot's logbook, newer, less weathered. As the agent carefully extracted it from the wreckage, Tom caught a glimpse of a red wax seal that appeared remarkably well preserved for something supposedly buried since 1944. "Agent Holmes, what's in that envelope?" "Mr. Bradley, that's not your concern." Tom watched as the agent opened the envelope with surgical precision, revealing what appeared to be official documents bearing multiple stamps and signatures. Even from his restricted vantage point, Tom could see that the papers contained typewritten text, arranged in the format of military orders. The agent's expression changed as he read the documents. He called Agent Holmes over with an urgency that suggested the contents were significant. Their whispered conversation was too quiet for Tom to overhear, but their body language indicated growing concern. Agent Holmes returned to Tom with a noticeably different demeanor. "Mr. Bradley, I'm going to ask you one more time to surrender all documentation and photographic evidence you obtained from this site." "Agent Holmes, I'm curious about something. How is it that an envelope containing apparently official documents survived 8 decades underground in better condition than items that were sealed in waterproof containers?" The question hung in the air like an accusation. Agent Holmes exchanged glances with her colleagues before responding. "Mr. Bradley, deterioration rates vary depending on storage conditions and materials." Tom had spent enough time studying historical artifacts to recognize when evidence didn't match expected preservation patterns. The envelope's pristine condition suggested it had been placed at the crash site much more recently than 1944. "Agent Holmes, those documents in the envelope, are they contemporary with the aircraft, or were they added later?" "Mr. Bradley, I strongly advise you to stop asking questions and start cooperating with this investigation." Tom reached into his jacket pocket and activated the voice recording function on his smartphone. A backup device the federal agents hadn't thought to confiscate. "Agent Holmes, for the record, are you confirming that this crash site has been accessed and modified since the original 1944 incident?" Agent Holmes stepped closer, her voice dropping to a threatening whisper. "Mr. Bradley, you're approaching the line between curious citizen and federal obstruction charge." At that moment, Tom's satellite phone rang. The caller ID showed Dr. Warren from the Montana Historical Society. "Dr. Warren, I'm at the crash site with federal agents." "Mr. Bradley, listen carefully. I've been researching the references you mentioned, and I need to warn you about something important. There are records of military operations during World War II that involve deliberate burial of evidence to prevent enemy acquisition of sensitive materials." Agent Holmes stepped forward. "Mr. Bradley, end that call immediately. Dr. Warren, the federal agents here seem very familiar with this site. Almost as if they've been here before, Mr. Bradley. If that's true, then this discovery may be far more significant than a simple crash site. Some buried aircraft were essentially time capsules, designed to preserve evidence of operations that couldn't be documented through normal channels." Agent Holmes reached for the phone, but Tom turned away, continuing the conversation while backing toward the tree line. "Dr. Warren, what kind of operations required that level of secrecy?" "Mr. Bradley, during the final years of World War II, there were experimental weapons programs, intelligence operations, and prisoner exchanges that occurred outside official military channels. Evidence of those operations would be politically explosive even today." Tom looked at the federal agents, who were now openly listening to his phone conversation. Their expressions suggested Dr. Warren's words were hitting uncomfortably close to home. Dr. Warren, the federal response here seems disproportionate for a simple aircraft recovery. Mr. Bradley, preserve whatever evidence you can. If this crash site contains proof of classified wartime operations, it may be the only remaining record of events that shaped the outcome of the war. Agent Holmes finally succeeded in taking the phone from Tom's hands. She immediately ended the call and handed the device to one of her colleagues. Mr. Bradley, Dr. Warren is misinformed about the nature of this discovery. This is a routine recovery of military remains, not some conspiracy theory about secret operations. Tom looked around the site, noting the sophisticated equipment the federal team had deployed, the obvious familiarity with the location, and the suspicious condition of recently discovered documents. Agent Holmes, if this is routine, why does everything about your response suggest you knew exactly what you'd find here? Dr. Sarah Chen had been tracking the missing aircraft for 17 years, ever since she discovered an anomaly in declassified military transportation records while researching her doctoral dissertation. The official logs showed a B-25 Mitchell bomber departing from a classified airfield in Nevada on September 14, 1944, but no corresponding arrival record at any Pacific Theater destination. When Tom Bradley's discovery hit the newswire services, Sarah immediately recognized the significance. She'd been waiting nearly 2 decades for someone to find aircraft 44-30892, and now a retired insurance adjuster and his dog had accomplished what teams of military historians had failed to achieve. Sarah arrived in Montana 12 hours after the initial news reports, driving straight through from her position at the University of Washington. Her reputation as a specialist in classified World War II operations had earned her access to archives that remained closed to most researchers, and what she'd learned about aircraft 44-3892 had convinced her that its discovery would rewrite the final months of the Pacific War. She found Tom Bradley at a truck stop diner outside Glacier County, looking like a man who'd seen too much in too short a time. Rex lay at his feet, still wearing the harness from their fateful hike. "Mr. Bradley, I'm Dr. Sarah Chen from the University of Washington. I believe we spoke briefly while you were at the crash site." Tom looked up from his untouched coffee with the wariness of someone who'd learned to be suspicious of unexpected contacts. "Dr. Chen, how did you find me?" "Small town, big news. The waitress told me you've been sitting here since the federal agents finished questioning you this morning." Tom gestured to the empty seat across from him. "Dr. Chen, yesterday I was a man who enjoyed weekend hikes. Today I'm apparently a threat to national security. What exactly have I stumbled into?" Sarah opened her laptop and pulled up a file she'd been assembling for nearly 2 decades. "Mr. Bradley, what you've discovered is aircraft 44-30892, which disappeared during what the military called Operation Nightfall. The mission was so classified that it doesn't appear in any official war records." Tom studied the documents on Sarah's screen. Flight manifests, fuel consumption calculations, weather reports, all the mundane paperwork that surrounded military operations. Except these records carried security classifications he'd never seen before. "Dr. Chen, what was Operation Nightfall?" "According to the fragments I've pieced together from various archives, it was a joint operation between American intelligence and German resistance fighters. The aircraft you discovered was carrying something that both governments wanted to keep secret, even from their own military commands." Sarah scrolled to a document that made Tom lean forward with interest. A German intelligence report, translated into English, describing an American aircraft carrying experimental materials of strategic importance that had been lost during transit to the Pacific Theater. "Dr. Chen, the Germans knew about this flight." "The Germans were tracking it, Mr. Bradley. This report suggests they had intelligence assets who provided detailed information about American atomic research, including transportation schedules for sensitive materials." Tom thought about the federal agents' rapid response and obvious familiarity with the crash site. Dr. Chen, if the Germans knew about this flight in 1944, and if the aircraft was carrying atomic materials, why wasn't this information released after the war? Sarah pulled up another document, this one bearing Soviet intelligence markings. Because it wasn't just the Germans who knew about Operation Nightfall. The Soviets also had intelligence about missing American atomic materials, and revealing that information would have compromised intelligence sources on all sides. Tom stared at the Soviet document, trying to process the implications. Dr. Chen, are you telling me that multiple governments have known about this crash site for 8 decades? Mr. Bradley, I'm telling you that your discovery threatens to expose intelligence operations that involve collaboration between enemies during wartime. The political implications of that revelation would be staggering. Sarah showed Tom a series of photographs she'd obtained from German archives. Images of American military personnel meeting with individuals in German uniforms, documents being exchanged, and what appeared to be joint planning sessions for unspecified operations. Mr. Bradley, during the final months of World War II, there were secret negotiations between American intelligence and German officers who wanted to surrender advanced weapons technology in exchange for protection from Soviet prosecution. Operation Nightfall was one of those exchanges. Tom studied the photographs with growing amazement. Dr. Chen, you're suggesting that Americans and Germans were collaborating while the war was still officially ongoing? Mr. Bradley, I'm suggesting that the reality of ending World War II was far more complex than the official histories indicate. Your crashed aircraft was carrying the evidence of those complexities. Sarah pulled up her final document, a partial manifest that listed the aircraft's cargo. Uranium samples, technical blueprints, and something described only as foreign national passengers, special handling required. Dr. Chen, foreign national passengers. Are you saying there were German personnel aboard this American aircraft? Mr. Bradley, I believe your crashed aircraft was carrying German scientists who were being transported to American research facilities as part of what would later become Operation Paperclip. But this transport occurred months before Operation Paperclip was officially authorized. Tom sat back in the diner booth, overwhelmed by the implications of Sarah's research. Dr. Chen, if German scientists were aboard that aircraft, and if they died in the crash, then their identities and the circumstances of their transportation would have to remain classified indefinitely. Exactly, Mr. Bradley, which explains why federal agents responded so quickly to your discovery and why they're so determined to control information about the crash site, Tom thought, about Agent Holmes's insistence on confiscating all documentation and her obvious familiarity with the site. Dr. Chen, how long do you think the government has known about the exact location of this crash? Sarah closed her laptop and looked directly at Tom. Mr. Bradley, based on the federal response time and their obvious preparation for this type of discovery, I believe they've known the location for decades. Your dog didn't uncover a lost aircraft. He uncovered a deliberately preserved time capsule that someone intended to remain buried forever. Walter Kowalski had been expecting this phone call for 79 years. When the nursing home's activities director handed him the phone and mentioned something about a discovered aircraft, Walter's arthritic hands trembled as he accepted the receiver. Mr. Kowalski, this is Tom Bradley. I understand you served as ground crew chief at Wendover Army Airfield during World War II. Walter's voice carried the weight of nearly 8 decades. Son, I worked on every type of aircraft that passed through Wendover, including some that officially never existed. Tom glanced at Dr. Chen, who had insisted they contact Walter after discovering his name in declassified personnel records. Mr. Kowalski, we've discovered the wreckage of a B-25 Mitchell bomber in Montana. The aircraft carried the designation 44-30892. The silence stretched so long that Tom wondered if the elderly veteran had fallen asleep. When Walter finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Son, you found Jimmy Morrison's bird. Tom felt his heart skip. Mr. Kowalski, did you know the crew personally? Jimmy Morrison was the finest pilot I ever worked with, and I've worked with plenty. But that last mission, God help us, we all knew it was a one-way trip. Dr. Chen leaned closer to the phone. Mr. Kowalski, this is Dr. Sarah Chen. Can you tell us anything about the mission that aircraft was assigned to? Mom, that mission was so classified that we weren't supposed to know it existed. But when you're the ground crew chief, you see everything. You know which aircraft get special modifications, which ones carry unusual cargo, and which crews say goodbye like they're not expecting to come home. Walter's breathing was labored, but his memory remained sharp. Jimmy Morrison came to see me the night before that flight. Said he had something he needed to leave behind, something that might matter someday if things went wrong. Tom exchanged glances with Dr. Chen. Mr. Kowalski, what did he leave with you? A letter, son. Jimmy made me promise to keep it until someone came asking about his mission. He said if anyone ever found his aircraft, they'd need to understand what really happened. Tom's pulse quickened. Mr. Kowalski, do you still have that letter? Son, I've been carrying that letter in my Bible for 79 years, waiting for this day. Jimmy Morrison was a good man who got caught up in something bigger than any of us understood. 3 hours later, Tom and Dr. Chen sat in the common room of the Sunset Manor nursing home, watching a frail but dignified 94-year-old veteran retrieve a yellowed envelope from his well-worn Bible. Walter's hands shook as he opened the letter, but his voice remained steady as he read. Mr. Bradley, Dr. Chen, Jimmy Morrison wrote this on September 14th, 1944, the night before his final mission. The letter was written in the same precise handwriting Tom had seen in the pilot's logbook. Jimmy Morrison's final words painted a picture of a mission that had troubled him deeply. Tom and Sarah, if someone is reading this letter, it means my aircraft went down during Operation Nightfall, and someone finally found the wreckage. What I'm about to tell you will sound unbelievable, but I swear on my mother's grave that every word is true. Walter paused, looking at Tom and Dr. Chen with eyes that had seen too much. Jimmy wrote that they were carrying more than just atomic materials. There were passengers aboard that aircraft, German scientists who were supposed to be delivered to a research facility in California. The letter continued in Jimmy Morrison's careful script. These German passengers weren't prisoners of war. They were voluntary defectors who had contacted American intelligence with offers to surrender advanced weapons technology. But their defection was happening outside official channels, arranged by intelligence officers who couldn't wait for formal diplomatic approval. Dr. Chen leaned forward intently. Mr. Kowalski, does the letter explain why the mission was aborted? Walter's voice grew heavy with old sorrow. Jimmy wrote that they discovered Soviet agents had infiltrated the operation. The German scientists were being tracked by Soviet intelligence, and the mission had been compromised from the beginning. Tom thought about the federal agents' rapid response and obvious familiarity with the crash site. Mr. Kowalski, what does the letter say about Protocol 7? Walter turned to the final page of the letter, his voice barely audible. Jimmy wrote that Protocol 7 was the emergency procedure for missions carrying sensitive personnel and materials. If the mission was compromised beyond recovery, the crew was authorized to crash the aircraft in a predetermined location and activate a cover-up protocol that would hide all evidence of the operation. The implications hit Tom like a physical blow. Mr. Kowalski, are you saying that Jimmy Morrison deliberately crashed his aircraft? Son, Jimmy Morrison and his crew sacrificed their lives to prevent Soviet agents from capturing German atomic scientists and weapons technology. They died protecting secrets that could have changed the outcome of the Cold War. Walter carefully folded the letter and handed it to Tom. Jimmy Morrison asked me to give this to whoever found his aircraft. He said the truth about Operation Nightfall needed to be preserved, even if it couldn't be revealed, for decades. Dr. Chen studied the letter with academic fascination mixed with personal sorrow. Mr. Kowalski, this letter suggests that the crash site was deliberately chosen and that the burial was part of the original mission plan. Ma'am, that's exactly what happened. The location in Montana was selected because it was remote, enough to remain undisturbed, but accessible enough for eventual recovery when the political situation allowed for disclosure. Tom realized the full scope of what they'd discovered. Mr. Kowalski, the federal agents who responded to my discovery, they knew about this plan all along. Walter nodded slowly. Son, there have been people monitoring that crash site for 8 decades, waiting for someone to find it. Jimmy Morrison and his crew were heroes who made the ultimate sacrifice, and their story deserves to be told. Walter closed his Bible and looked at Tom with the intensity of someone passing along a sacred trust. Son Jimmy Morrison trusted me to preserve his story. Now I'm trusting you to make sure the world learns about the courage of those men who died protecting America's secrets. Dr. Patricia Reynolds had been contacted by Dr. Chen through university channels. Her expertise in archaeological recovery of sensitive military sites making her an essential addition to their unofficial investigation. Patricia arrived in Montana with a small team of graduate students and equipment that could perform detailed excavation while preserving the integrity of historical artifacts, working under cover of darkness to avoid federal surveillance. Patricia's team established their operation in a clearing 2 miles from the official crash site. Tom had provided detailed photographs and GPS coordinates, allowing them to plan their approach without direct access to the location. The federal agents have established a perimeter around the primary site. Patricia explained to Tom and Dr. Chen as they reviewed reconnaissance photographs. But their focus appears to be on the cockpit and forward cargo areas. If this aircraft was configured for special cargo transport, there could be additional compartments they haven't accessed. Patricia's team had brought ground-penetrating radar equipment that could map the aircraft's structure without physical excavation. The radar images revealed something that surprised everyone. The aircraft appeared to be largely intact beneath the surface, with significant portions of the fuselage and cargo areas still unexplored. Tom, your initial discovery only exposed about 20% of the aircraft, Patricia said, pointing to the radar display. The rear cargo compartment appears to be sealed and undisturbed. Dr. Chen studied the radar images with growing excitement. Patricia, if the rear compartment was sealed as part of Protocol 7, it might contain evidence that the federal agents haven't discovered. Tom looked at the radar display, noting what appeared to be regular geometric shapes in the rear cargo area. Patricia, those rectangular objects, could they be storage containers? Tom, the radar signature suggests metal containers with very dense contents. The density readings are consistent with lead shielding, which would be used for transporting radioactive materials. Patricia's graduate assistant, James, had been monitoring police radio frequencies and reported increasing federal activity around the official crash site. Dr. Reynolds, they're bringing in heavy excavation equipment tomorrow. If we're going to access the rear compartment, it has to be tonight. Working with surgical precision, Patricia's team used handheld augers to create narrow access shafts to the buried aircraft. Their technique avoided the massive excavation the federal agents were planning, while allowing them to reach the undisturbed cargo areas. The first breakthrough came at 2:47 a.m., when James's auger struck metal. Dr. Reynolds, I've reached what appears to be an intact cargo door. Patricia carefully widened the access shaft until they could lower a fiber optic camera into the buried compartment. The images that appeared on her laptop screen made everyone lean forward with amazement. The rear cargo compartment contained 3 large metal containers, each bearing radiation warning symbols and German text. The containers appeared to be in pristine condition, their lead-lined construction having protected them from decades of underground exposure. My God, Dr. Chen whispered. Those are German uranium storage containers, but it was what lay beside the containers that made Tom's blood run cold. A human skeleton, still wearing what appeared to be a German uniform, sat propped against the cargo compartment wall. In the skeleton's hand was a metal briefcase, and scattered around the remains were documents bearing Nazi insignia. Patricia maneuvered the camera to capture clear images of the documents. Even through the low-resolution display, they could see official German seals and what appeared to be scientific formulas written in precise handwriting. "Patricia, can you get the camera closer to those documents?" The enhanced images revealed something that challenged everything they thought they knew about the aircraft's mission. The German documents weren't just scientific papers, they were intelligence reports about American atomic research, complete with detailed drawings of atomic weapon designs. Tom stared at the display in disbelief. "Dr. Chen, if these are German intelligence reports about American atomic weapons, then this wasn't just a transport mission for defecting scientists." Dr. Chen's expression grew grave as she studied the documents. "Tom, this suggests the Germans had detailed knowledge of American atomic weapons development months before the war ended." Patricia continued maneuvering the camera, revealing more disturbing evidence. Additional skeleton remains, personal effects bearing both American and German markings, and what appeared to be a substantial amount of gold bullion stored alongside the uranium containers. "Patricia, how many people died in this aircraft?" "Based on what I can see through the camera, at least 6 individuals. But Tom, some of these remains are wearing German uniforms, while others appear to be in American military gear." The implications were staggering. The aircraft hadn't just been carrying German defectors to American research facilities. It had been carrying evidence of intelligence exchanges between American and German personnel that occurred while the countries were still officially at war. James monitored his radiation detector throughout the camera exploration. "Dr. Reynolds, I'm getting elevated readings even through the lead shielding. Those uranium containers are definitely radioactive." Patricia made the decision to extract one of the smaller documents for detailed examination. Using specialized tools designed for archaeological recovery, her team carefully retrieved a single page that had been protected by the metal briefcase. The document, when translated by Dr. Chen's German language skills, revealed something that made everyone fall silent. It was a detailed report on American atomic weapons research, compiled by German intelligence and dated September 1944. The report included precise drawings of atomic weapon components that shouldn't have been available to German intelligence. This document proves that German intelligence had penetrated the Manhattan Project, Dr. Chen said quietly. And if this aircraft was carrying both German defectors and evidence of that penetration, then the mission was far more complex than a simple transport operation. Tom realized they had uncovered evidence that could rewrite the history of World War II's final months. "Dr. Chen, Patricia, what we found here suggests that both governments were engaged in intelligence operations that went far beyond anything in the official records." Patricia carefully sealed the extracted document in a protective container. "Tom, this evidence needs to be preserved and studied properly. But given the federal response to your initial discovery, I suspect there are people who would prefer this information remain buried." As dawn approached, Patricia's team completed their documentation and carefully concealed their access shafts. They had obtained enough evidence to prove that the crashed aircraft contained far more secrets than anyone had imagined. But they had also discovered that those secrets involved collaboration between enemies during wartime, information that could destabilize historical understanding of how World War II actually ended. The discovery of German equipment near the crash site came when Patricia's team expanded their search perimeter to look for evidence of how the aircraft had arrived at its final resting place. Using metal detectors in a systematic grid pattern, they located a cache of materials buried approximately 50 yards from the main wreckage. James was the first to uncover what appeared to be a German military pack, its leather construction preserved by the same dry mountain conditions that had protected the aircraft. Inside the pack, wrapped in oiled cloth, was a collection of documents that made the team realize they had stumbled into something far more complex than a simple aircraft crash. Dr. Reynolds, these documents are in German, but they appear to be military intelligence reports, James said, carefully extracting papers that bore the distinctive eagle and swastika insignia of the SS. Patricia examined the documents with the practiced eye of someone who had spent years studying World War II artifacts. These aren't just intelligence reports. Look at the classification markings. These are SS Oberfuhrer level documents. Only senior SS officers would have access to materials marked at this classification level. Dr. Chen's German language skills proved invaluable as she translated the documents. The first report, dated September 10th, 1944, detailed the tracking of an American aircraft carrying special materials and personnel from Nevada to an unspecified Pacific destination. This report shows that German intelligence knew about Operation Nightfall 4 days before the aircraft departed, Dr. Chen said, her voice tight with the implications. They not only knew the mission existed, but they had detailed information about the cargo and passengers. The second document was even more disturbing. A communication from SS intelligence headquarters in Berlin to operatives in the United States, providing specific instructions for intercepting the American aircraft and capturing its cargo and passengers alive. Tom studied the translated document with growing unease. Dr. Chen, this suggests there were German operatives actively operating in the United States during the final months of the war. Tom, this goes beyond simple espionage. These documents indicate a coordinated operation to capture American atomic research and German defectors before they could reach Allied research facilities. Patricia continued excavating the German cache and discovered something that changed their understanding of the crash site entirely. A leather briefcase, remarkably well preserved, contained what appeared to be operational maps of the Montana region, with the crash site clearly marked and annotated in German. The crash site location wasn't random, Patricia announced, studying the German maps. These maps show detailed topographical analysis of this area, including notes about accessibility, concealment, and recovery logistics. Dr. Chen translated the German annotations on the maps. These notes discuss the site's advantages for temporary storage of sensitive materials pending political resolution. It's almost as if they were planning to use this location as a hiding place. James made another discovery that sent chills through the team. Buried beneath the maps was a German military radio, its components still intact after 8 decades underground. More significantly, attached to the radio was a maintenance log showing regular use through October 1944, weeks after the aircraft had supposedly crashed. Dr. Reynolds, if this radio was operational after the crash, it means there were survivors at this site for an extended period. Patricia examined the radio with forensic precision. James, this isn't just any military radio. This is a high-frequency unit designed for long-range communication with German command structures. Someone was using this equipment to communicate with German intelligence after the aircraft went down. The implications were staggering. The crash site hadn't been simply an aircraft accident followed by burial. It had been an active location where German operatives had maintained contact with their superiors while dealing with the aftermath of the Operation Nightfall mission. Dr. Chen found additional documents that painted an even more complex picture. Communication logs showing radio contact between the crash site and both German and American intelligence services, suggesting that multiple governments were aware of the situation and were negotiating some kind of resolution. Tom, these communication logs show that American and German intelligence officers were in direct contact about this incident. They weren't just enemies shooting at each other, they were negotiating, Tom thought about Agent Holmes's rapid response and obvious familiarity with the crash site. Dr. Chen, if American intelligence knew about German operatives at this location, and if they were negotiating rather than fighting, then the entire narrative about World War II intelligence operations needs to be reconsidered. Patricia discovered the most disturbing evidence in the bottom of the German briefcase. A set of photographs showing American and German personnel standing together at what appeared to be the crash site, examining the aircraft wreckage and its cargo. The photographs were dated October 1944, weeks after the official end of Operation Nightfall. These photographs prove that American and German personnel were collaborating at this site after the crash, Patricia said, studying the images with amazement. This wasn't a recovery operation, it was a joint investigation. Dr. Chen identified some of the individuals in the photographs through their uniforms and insignia. Tom, some of these American personnel are wearing intelligence service uniforms, not regular military gear. This was a high-level operation involving specialized personnel from both sides. The final document in the German cache was a joint agreement, signed by representatives of both American and German intelligence services, establishing protocols for the mutual preservation of sensitive materials and personnel pending post-war political arrangements. Tom stared at the agreement in disbelief. Dr. Chen, Patricia, what we've found here suggests that American and German intelligence services were already planning for post-war cooperation while the fighting was still ongoing. Tom, this evidence indicates that some intelligence operations transcended the official war narrative. Both sides recognized that they would need to work together against Soviet intelligence after Germany's defeat. Patricia carefully documented and preserved all the German materials, recognizing their historical significance. Tom, Dr. Chen, what we've discovered here could fundamentally alter our understanding of how World War II actually ended. This wasn't just about defeating Nazi Germany. It was about positioning for the Cold War that everyone knew was coming. As they prepared to leave the site, Tom realized that their discovery had implications far beyond historical curiosity. If American and German intelligence services had been collaborating in 1944, then the rapid federal response to his initial discovery wasn't about protecting wartime secrets. It was about protecting evidence of intelligence operations that had shaped the entire post-war world order. The pressure began with subtle intimidation. Tom returned to his hotel room to find his belongings had been searched with professional precision. Everything returned to almost exactly the right place, but with small telltale signs that someone had been through his possessions. His laptop had been moved 2 inches from where he'd left it. His hiking boots were facing the wrong direction. Dr. Chen experienced similar treatment. Her university office was randomly selected for a security audit, and she received official notice that her research grant funding was under review for compliance with federal research guidelines. The message was clear, without being explicitly threatening. Patricia's archaeological team faced the most direct pressure. Federal agents arrived at their hotel with warrants to search their equipment for potentially hazardous materials. The search was thorough and professional, but it sent a clear message that their activities were being monitored and could be shut down at any time. "They're not trying to arrest us," Patricia explained to Tom and Dr. Chen during a carefully planned meeting at a rural diner. "They're trying to control us. Classic intimidation tactics designed to make us back down without creating a public incident." Tom had been documenting every instance of surveillance and intimidation, building a record that could be used if the pressure escalated to actual legal action. "Patricia, they searched my room, but they didn't confiscate anything. Dr. Chen, they threatened your funding, but they didn't actually cancel it. They want us to censor ourselves." Dr. Chen had been thinking about the political implications of their discovery. "Tom, what we've found challenges the official narrative of how World War II ended. If evidence of American-German intelligence cooperation became public, It could undermine trust in government institutions and affect current international relationships. Their conversation was interrupted when Tom's satellite phone rang. The caller ID showed a number he didn't recognize, but when he answered, the voice was familiar. "Mr. Bradley, this is Agent Holmes. I think it's time we had a frank conversation about your situation." Tom activated the speaker function so Patricia and Dr. Chen could hear. "Agent Holmes, what kind of conversation did you have in mind?" "Mr. Bradley, you and your colleagues have been conducting unauthorized archaeological activities on federal land. That's a felony that could result in significant prison time for all involved parties." Patricia leaned toward the phone. "Agent Holmes, this is Dr. Patricia Reynolds. Our activities have been limited to areas outside the federal perimeter you established. We haven't violated any posted restrictions. Dr. Reynolds, we're aware of your nighttime excavations and the materials you've removed from the site. Those activities constitute theft of federal property and interfere with an ongoing national security investigation." Dr. Chen joined the conversation with academic calm. "Agent Holmes, this is Dr. Sarah Chen. The materials we've examined are historically significant artifacts that belong in academic archives, not government storage facilities where they'll never be studied or understood. Dr. Chen, the materials you've discovered involve ongoing national security considerations that supersede academic interests. Your continued interference could compromise operations that affect current American safety." Tom felt his patience wearing thin. "Agent Holmes, what current operations could possibly be affected by the discovery of artifacts from 1944? A pause, longer than Agent Holmes probably intended. "Mr. Bradley, intelligence operations have consequences that extend far beyond their original time frame. The relationships and protocols established during World War II continue to affect modern international security arrangements." Patricia realized the significance of Agent Holmes's admission. "Agent Holmes, are you confirming that intelligence relationships established during Operation Nightfall continue to influence current government operations?" "Dr. Reynolds, I'm confirming that your discoveries could compromise intelligence methods and sources that remain relevant to American national security." Dr. Chen pressed the advantage. "Agent Holmes, if these intelligence relationships are still active, then the American people have a right to know about agreements made in their name during wartime." "Dr. Chen, the American people have a right to be protected from information that could compromise their safety. Sometimes protecting democracy requires limiting public access to information that could be used against democratic institutions." Tom recognized the circular logic of national security arguments. "Agent Holmes, who decides what information is too dangerous for the American people to know? And how do we know those decisions are being made in the public interest rather than to protect government officials from embarrassment?" "Mr. Bradley, those decisions are made by people with access to information that you don't have. People who understand the full scope of threats facing this country." Patricia had been studying the patterns of federal surveillance around their activities. "Agent Holmes, our research suggests that this crash site has been monitored for decades. If that's true, then someone has been making decisions about concealing this information for 3 generations. At what point does secrecy become a cover-up?" Another long pause. "Dr. Reynolds, some secrets are preserved because revealing them would cause more harm than maintaining them. The crash site you've discovered contains evidence of operations that saved lives and shortened the war. Revealing that evidence now could undermine the trust and cooperation that continues to protect American interests." Dr. Chen had been taking notes throughout the conversation. "Agent Holmes, you're asking us to trust that government officials are making decisions about historical truth in the public interest. But the evidence we've found suggests that similar decisions were made during World War II to conceal intelligence operations from the American people. Why should we believe that current decisions are more trustworthy than historical ones?" Dr. Chen, because the alternative is chaos. Democracy depends on public trust in institutions, and that trust can be undermined by information that's taken out of context or misinterpreted by people without the proper background to understand its significance. Tom thought about Walter Kowalski's letter and Jimmy Morrison's sacrifice. Agent Holmes, the men who died in that aircraft gave their lives to protect American secrets. Don't they deserve to have their story told? Mr. Bradley, those men died to protect operations that continue to protect American lives today. The best way to honor their sacrifice is to preserve the secrecy they died to maintain. The conversation ended with Agent Holmes providing a final warning. Mr. Bradley, Dr. Chen, Dr. Reynolds, you have 48 hours to surrender all materials taken from the crash site and to cease any further investigation. After that, your activities will be considered a direct threat to national security and will respond accordingly. As Tom ended the call, he realized they had reached a decision point. They could surrender their evidence and walk away, allowing 8 decades of secrecy to continue. Or they could proceed with their investigation, knowing that they would face the full power of federal law enforcement. Patricia broke the silence. Tom, Dr. Chen, Agent Holmes just confirmed that this discovery involves active intelligence operations. That means what we found isn't just historically significant, it's politically explosive. Dr. Chen nodded grimly. And it means that people with very powerful interests are watching our every move, waiting for us to make a mistake that would justify shutting us down permanently. Tom's decision to contact the Glacier County Tribune was born from frustration more than strategy. After Agent Holmes's ultimatum, he realized that secrecy was the government's greatest weapon. If their discovery became public knowledge, it would be much harder for federal agents to make the evidence disappear. Rebecca Martinez, the Tribune's editor, had been covering local news for 15 years, but nothing had prepared her for Tom's story. When he walked into her office with a box of photographs and documents, she initially assumed he was another conspiracy theorist with an elaborate fantasy about government cover-ups. Mr. Bradley, you're claiming you discovered a World War II aircraft with classified documents and radioactive materials, and that federal agents are trying to suppress your findings. Tom spread his photographs across Rebecca's desk. Ms. Martinez, I'm not claiming anything. I'm showing you photographic evidence of everything I've described. Rebecca studied the images with growing amazement. The aircraft wreckage was clearly visible, the military markings unmistakable. The documents, even partially translated, told a story that challenged everything she thought she knew about World War II history. Mr. Bradley, assuming these photographs are authentic, why are you bringing this to a small-town newspaper? This is the kind of story that belongs in the Washington Post or New York Times. Tom pulled out copies of Walter Kowalski's letter and Dr. Chen's research files. Miss Martinez, I've tried contacting national media outlets. They want independent verification from official sources before they'll consider publishing anything. But the official sources are the same people trying to suppress this information. Rebecca understood the journalistic dilemma. Without government confirmation, major newspapers wouldn't touch a story this explosive. But if the government was actively suppressing information, confirmation would never come through official channels. Mr. Bradley, what do you expect a small regional newspaper to accomplish that national outlets can't? Ms. Martinez, small newspapers have advantages that national outlets don't. You're not dependent on maintaining relationships with federal officials. You serve a local community that values independent reporting over political considerations. Rebecca had built her career on careful fact-checking and responsible journalism. Mr. Bradley, if I publish this story, I need to be absolutely certain it's accurate. Can you provide me with sources I can contact independently? Tom gave her Dr. Chen's contact information and Walter Kowalski's details at the nursing home. Ms. Martinez, both of these people can verify different aspects of the story. Dr. Chen can confirm the historical research, and Mr. Kowalski can authenticate the letter from the aircraft's pilot. Rebecca spent the next 6 hours making phone calls and verifying details. Dr. Chen's academic credentials were impeccable, and her research into Operation Nightfall was thoroughly documented. Walter Kowalski's military service record confirmed his position at Wendover Army Airfield during the relevant time period. The breakthrough came when Rebecca contacted the National Archives to request information about aircraft. 443892. The archivist's response was immediate and telling. Ms. Martinez, I can't provide any information about that aircraft designation. Those records are classified under national security provisions. Rebecca had covered enough government stories to recognize evasive responses. Can you tell me what classification level applies to those records? Ms. Martinez, I can tell you that records classified at that level typically involve operations that remain sensitive to current national security interests. Rebecca realized she had stumbled into confirmation of Tom's story. If the aircraft records were classified under current national security provisions, it meant the government considered the information relevant to ongoing operations. Her investigation took an unexpected turn when she discovered that the Tribune's archives contained coverage of unusual military activity in the region during September 1944. The newspaper's founder had reported mysterious aircraft movements and temporary restrictions on civilian access to certain mountain areas. The 1944 coverage was frustratingly vague, written under wartime censorship restrictions, but it confirmed that something significant had occurred in the exact area where Tom made his discovery. Rebecca found additional confirmation in the Tribune's correspondence files. Letters from local residents describing strange lights in the mountains, unusual radio interference, and military personnel asking questions about remote trails and access roads. Mr. Bradley, our own archives support your story. There was definitely unusual military activity in that area during September 1944, and local residents noticed things that weren't explained by official announcements. Tom felt a surge of vindication. Ms. Martinez, are you going to publish the story? Mr. Bradley, I'm going to publish a carefully researched article about your discovery and the questions it raises about historical government operations. But I want you to understand the implications of that decision. Rebecca explained that publishing the story would likely trigger federal attention that could be overwhelming for a small newspaper. Mr. Bradley, once this story appears in print, there's no taking it back. The government will respond, and that response could be very aggressive. Tom thought about Jimmy Morrison's letter and the sacrifice made by the crew of aircraft 443892. Ms. Martinez, those men died to protect American secrets. The least we can do is make sure their story is told. Rebecca made her decision. Mr. Bradley will run the story in tomorrow's edition, but I want you to be prepared for what comes next. This isn't just a historical discovery anymore. It's a direct challenge to government authority over classified information. The Tribune's front page the next morning carried a headline that would change everything. Local hiker discovers buried military aircraft with classified cargo. Rebecca's article was carefully written, focusing on documented facts rather than speculation. But the implications were clear. Within hours of the newspaper's distribution, Rebecca's phone was ringing constantly. Reporters from national outlets, government officials demanding retractions, and historians requesting copies of the evidence. The story had taken on a life of its own. Tom watched the media explosion from his hotel room, realizing that their discovery had crossed a threshold. What had started as a weekend hike with his dog had become a national controversy about government transparency and historical truth. Dr. Chen called Tom as the story spread across social media and news websites. Tom, Rebecca Martinez's article has been picked up by major news outlets. This story is going viral. Patricia added her perspective during a conference call. Tom, Dr. Chen, the archaeological evidence we've gathered is now part of a public discussion about government secrecy. That changes everything about how we proceed. Tom looked out his hotel window at the growing crowd of reporters and federal agents gathering in the town center. Dr. Chen, Patricia, I think we've reached the point where this story is bigger than any of us. Whatever happens next, at least the truth is starting to come out. Rebecca Martinez had accomplished what Tom hoped. She'd made the story too public for the government to simply make it disappear. But as Tom watched federal vehicles arriving in increasing numbers, he realized that making the story public had also escalated the stakes far beyond anything he'd anticipated. Dr. Eugene Hartwell had been expecting this moment for 79 years. At 96, he was one of the last surviving physicists from the Manhattan Project, and he'd spent decades wondering if the truth about Operation Nightfall would ever emerge. When his granddaughter showed him the Tribune article on her tablet, his hands trembled as he read Tom Bradley's account. "Sarah, help me contact this Mr. Bradley," Eugene said, his voice carrying the weight of 8 decades of carefully guarded secrets. "It's time I told someone what really happened." Tom received the call at his hotel room while fielding interview requests from national media outlets. The voice on the phone was frail but determined. "Mr. Bradley, my name is Dr. Eugene Hartwell. I worked on the Manhattan Project during World War II, and I have information about the aircraft you discovered." Tom felt his pulse quicken. "Dr. Hartwell, what can you tell me about Operation Nightfall?" "Mr. Bradley, I was the physicist who prepared the uranium samples that were loaded aboard aircraft 44-30892. What I'm about to tell you has been classified for nearly 8 decades, but I believe the time has come for the truth." 2 hours later, Tom and Dr. Chen sat in the modest living room of Dr. Hartwell's retirement community apartment, listening to a confession that would reshape their understanding of the entire discovery. Dr. Hartwell's apartment was filled with scientific journals and photographs from his Manhattan Project days. On his desk sat a leather portfolio that had clearly been waiting for this moment for decades. "Mr. Bradley, Dr. Chen, in September 1944, I was ordered to prepare a special shipment of enriched uranium for transport to the Pacific Theater. The official orders indicated the materials were needed for weapon assembly at a forward location." Dr. Hartwell opened his portfolio and revealed documents that bore the distinctive classifications of the Manhattan Project. But the real purpose of Operation Nightfall wasn't to transport uranium for American weapons. It was to exchange uranium samples with German scientists who had information about Soviet atomic research. Tom studied the documents with amazement. "Dr. Hartwell, are you saying that American scientists were trading atomic materials with German scientists while we were still at war with Germany?" "Mr. Bradley, by September 1944, it was clear that Germany would be defeated within months. But intelligence reports indicated that the Soviets were much closer to developing atomic weapons than we'd realized. Some people in the American government decided that sharing information with German atomic scientists was preferable to allowing Soviet scientists to capture German research." Dr. Chen reviewed the documents with her historian's eye for detail. "Dr. Hartwell, these orders show uranium being shipped to German scientists. Was this authorized at the highest levels of government?" Dr. Hartwell's expression grew heavy with old guilt. "Dr. Chen, Operation Nightfall was authorized by a small group of officials who believed they were preventing the Soviets from gaining atomic superiority after the war. But the operation was conducted without the knowledge of President Roosevelt or most Manhattan Project leadership. The implications were staggering. A rogue group within the American government had been conducting unauthorized intelligence operations involving atomic materials and enemy scientists." "Dr. Hartwell, what happened when the aircraft crashed?" Tom asked. "Mr. Bradley, the crash wasn't an accident. Intelligence reports indicated that Soviet agents had infiltrated the operation and were planning to capture the German scientists and uranium samples. The decision was made to abort the mission using Protocol 7, Dr. Hartwell pulled out a document that bore his own signature alongside several other Manhattan Project physicists. "This is the authorization for Protocol 7. We agreed that if the mission was compromised, the aircraft and all evidence of the operation would be destroyed to prevent Soviet acquisition of the materials and information." Dr. Chen read the Protocol 7 authorization with growing understanding. "Dr. Hartwell, this document authorizes the deliberate crash of the aircraft and the burial of all evidence. The crew knew they were on a suicide mission. Dr. Chen, Lieutenant Morrison and his crew volunteered for the mission after being fully briefed on Protocol 7. They understood that they might have to sacrifice their lives to prevent Soviet agents from capturing American and German atomic secrets." Tom thought about the letter Walter Kowalski had preserved for 8 decades. "Dr. Hartwell, did Lieutenant Morrison know about the unauthorized nature of the operation?" "Mr. Bradley, Lieutenant Morrison was told only what he needed to know to complete the mission. The crew believed they were conducting an authorized intelligence operation to prevent Soviet acquisition of atomic technology." Dr. Hartwell retrieved one final document from his portfolio, a Manhattan Project security badge with his photograph and clearance level clearly visible. "Mr. Bradley, Dr. Chen, I'm giving you this badge as proof of my authority to discuss these matters. At my age, I'm more concerned about historical truth than government secrecy." Dr. Chen examined the badge with academic fascination. "Dr. Hartwell, why are you revealing this information now, after keeping it secret for so many decades?" "Dr. Chen, because the men who died in that aircraft deserved to have their sacrifice recognized. And because the American people deserve to know that some government officials were conducting unauthorized operations that could have changed the outcome of World War II." Dr. Hartwell explained that the uranium samples aboard aircraft 443892 represented a significant portion of America's enriched uranium stockpile in 1944. "Mr. Bradley, if those materials had fallen into Soviet hands, it could have accelerated Soviet atomic weapons development by months or even years." Tom realized the full scope of what they had discovered. "Dr. Hartwell, Operation Nightfall wasn't just about intelligence sharing. It was about preventing the Soviets from winning the atomic race." "Mr. Bradley, exactly. The officials who authorized Operation Nightfall believed they were preventing a Soviet atomic monopoly that could have dominated the post-war world. But they were conducting that operation without proper authorization and without considering the full implications of trading atomic materials with enemy scientists." Dr. Hartwell's confession provided the missing context for all the evidence Tom and his colleagues had discovered. The German documents, the joint American-German operations, the ongoing government secrecy, everything made sense within the framework of unauthorized intelligence operations designed to prevent Soviet atomic supremacy. "Dr. Hartwell, are you willing to go public with this information?" Dr. Chen asked. "Dr. Chen, at 96 years old, I'm beyond worrying about government retaliation. The truth about Operation Nightfall needs to be told, and the sacrifice of Lieutenant Morrison's crew needs to be recognized." Dr. Hartwell stood slowly and walked to his window, looking out at the peaceful retirement community grounds. "Mr. Bradley, Dr. Chen, I've carried the guilt of Operation Nightfall for nearly 8 decades. Those young men died because of decisions I helped make, and their families never learned the truth about their sacrifice." Tom understood that Dr. Hartwell's confession would provide the credibility their story needed to survive government attempts at suppression. "Dr. Hartwell, your testimony could change how the world understands the end of World War II." "Mr. Bradley, changing historical understanding is less important to me than honoring the memory of brave men who died protecting secrets. They didn't even fully understand the international response to Rebecca." Martinez's Tribune article caught everyone off guard. Within 24 hours of publication, Tom received phone calls from historians in Germany, Russia, and the United Kingdom, all claiming knowledge of Operation Nightfall from their own national archives. Dr. Dmitry Volkov called from Moscow State University, his accent thick but his English precise. "Mr. Bradley, I am historian specializing in Soviet intelligence operations during World War II. My grandfather was KGB officer who tracked missing American atomic materials in 1944. Tom put the call on speaker so Dr. Chen could listen. Dr. Volkov, what can you tell us about Soviet knowledge of Operation Nightfall? Mr. Bradley, Soviet intelligence knew about unauthorized American operation to exchange atomic materials with German scientists. My grandfather's file, declassified in 1991, shows detailed surveillance of this operation from beginning." Dr. Chen leaned forward with interest. "Dr. Volkov, did Soviet intelligence attempt to intervene in Operation Nightfall?" Dr. Chen, Soviet agents were tracking American aircraft, but operation was aborted before interception could occur. My grandfather's reports show confusion about aircraft disappearance. Soviets knew it crashed, but could never locate wreckage. Tom felt pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. Dr. Volkov, did Soviet intelligence know about the German scientists who were supposed to be aboard the aircraft? Mr. Bradley, Soviet intelligence had identified German nuclear physicists Dr. Hans Müller and Dr. Werner Schmidt as persons of extreme interest. Loss of these scientists was considered major intelligence failure by Soviet Union. Dr. Chen's historical research had uncovered references to both scientists. Dr. Volkov, do you have information about what happened to Dr. Müller and Dr. Schmidt after the crash? Dr. Chen, this is most interesting aspect of my grandfather's files. Both scientists survived crash and were recovered by joint American-German operation. They were transported to United States under false identities months before official Operation Paperclip began. The implications were staggering. If German scientists had been successfully rescued from the crash site and brought to America under false identities, it meant the entire Operation Nightfall incident had been cover for an early version of what would later become Operation Paperclip. Dr. Volkov continued with information that challenged everything they thought they understood about the crash. Mr. Bradley, Soviet intelligence concluded that aircraft crash was deliberate deception to hide successful extraction of German scientists and atomic materials. Tom thought about the evidence they'd found at the crash site. Dr. Volkov, if the crash was a deception, then the human remains we discovered might not be the missing German scientists. Mr. Bradley, exactly. Soviet analysis suggested that casualties aboard aircraft were American crew members and lower-level German personnel, while priority scientists were extracted before crash occurred. Dr. Chen realized they needed to re-examine all their physical evidence. Dr. Volkov, do you have documentation that could help us identify the actual casualties at the crash site? Dr. Chen, I can provide copies of Soviet intelligence files that include photographs and biographical information about German scientists who were supposed to be aboard aircraft. Comparison with physical evidence might reveal true identities of crash victims. The conversation took another surprising turn when Dr. Volkov revealed that Soviet intelligence had maintained surveillance of the Montana crash site for decades after the war. Mr. Bradley, Soviet agents monitored crash location until 1960s, expecting eventual American recovery operation. When no recovery occurred, Soviets concluded that site contained only deception materials rather than genuine intelligence value. Tom understood why Agent Holmes had responded so quickly to his discovery. Dr. Volkov, if Soviet intelligence was monitoring the site until the 1960s, then American intelligence probably knew about that surveillance. Mr. Bradley, American and Soviet intelligence services were both aware of each other's interest in crash site. This created what intelligence analysts call mutual observation paradox. Both sides watched site because other side was watching site. Dr. Chen asked about other international connections to Operation Nightfall. Dr. Volkov, did other Allied governments know about this operation? Dr. Chen, British intelligence was informed about Operation Nightfall through special relationship with American intelligence. French and other allied intelligence services learned about Operation only after war. Indeed, Dr. Volkov's most significant revelation came when he described recently declassified documents about post-war intelligence cooperation. Mr. Bradley, Operation Nightfall established precedent for American-Soviet intelligence cooperation that continued throughout Cold War. Both sides recognized value of preventing nuclear proliferation to other nations. Tom realized they had uncovered evidence of intelligence cooperation that transcended the official Cold War narrative. Dr. Volkov, are you saying that American and Soviet intelligence services work together to control nuclear technology? Mr. Bradley, Operation Nightfall demonstrated that both superpowers preferred bilateral nuclear competition to multilateral nuclear proliferation. Secret cooperation to prevent other nations from acquiring nuclear weapons became foundation of modern non-proliferation efforts. The conversation concluded with Dr. Volkov offering to share Soviet archival materials that could provide independent verification of American claims about Operation Nightfall. Mr. Bradley, Dr. Chen, truth about this operation affects how world understands origins of modern international security arrangements. After ending the call with Dr. Volkov, Tom and Dr. Chen sat in stunned silence, processing the international implications of their discovery. Tom, if Soviet intelligence was tracking Operation Nightfall from the beginning, and if the operation established precedents for Cold War intelligence cooperation, then what we've found isn't just about World War II, Dr. Chen said. It's about the secret foundations of the modern international order. Tom looked at the growing pile of evidence they'd accumulated. Documents, photographs, testimonies, and now international archival materials. Dr. Chen, I'm beginning to understand why Agent Holmes was so determined to suppress this information. Operation Nightfall doesn't just reveal wartime secrets. It reveals how the post-war world was really organized. The next phone call came from Dr. Heinrich Weber at the University of Berlin, confirming that German archives contained extensive documentation about Operation Nightfall and its role in establishing post-war intelligence relationships between former enemies. Tom realized that their weekend hiking discovery had exposed a web of international intelligence cooperation that had shaped global politics for 8 decades. The crashed aircraft in Montana hadn't just been carrying atomic materials and German scientists. It had been carrying the secret. Blueprints for how the world's superpowers would manage nuclear technology and international security for generations to come. Patricia's ground-penetrating radar had detected an anomaly 200 yards northeast of the main crash site, a rectangular depression that suggested intentional excavation and burial. Working with Tom and Dr. Chen under cover of pre-dawn darkness, her team began careful excavation of what appeared to be a separate burial ground. The first indication that they had found something significant came when James's metal detector registered multiple contacts in a precise grid pattern. Dr. Reynolds, these readings suggest organized burial sites, not random debris scatter. Patricia worked with archaeological precision, using brushes and small tools to expose what lay beneath decades of accumulated soil and forest debris. What emerged was a series of military grave markers, weathered but still legible, arranged in neat rows that spoke of careful, respectful burial. Tom, these are temporary military grave markers, the kind used for battlefield burials when proper tombstones aren't available, Patricia explained as she carefully cleaned the first marker. But the names on these markers don't match the crew members from aircraft 44 30892. Dr. Chen studied the exposed marker with growing confusion. The name here is Klaus Müller, with dates showing he died in September 1944. But this is buried in American soil, far from any official battlefield. Tom thought about Dr. Volkov's information regarding missing German scientists. Patricia, Dr. Chen, could this be where the German personnel from Operation Nightfall were actually buried? As Patricia's team continued excavating, they uncovered 6 grave markers total. 3 bore German names with dates of death in September 1944. 2 showed American names that didn't match any official casualty records from the period. The 6th marker was the most disturbing of all. It bore no name, only the inscription, "Unknown Foreign National, September 15th, 1944. Dr. Reynolds. "These burial sites have been maintained," James observed, pointing to evidence of periodic care around the graves. "Someone has been tending these graves for decades." Patricia examined the evidence of maintenance with forensic attention. Fresh flowers that had been placed within the last few months, weeds cleared around each marker, and soil that showed signs of regular disturbance consistent with ongoing care. "Tom, Dr. Chen, someone has been visiting this burial ground regularly for 8 decades. This isn't a forgotten military cemetery. It's an active memorial site." Dr. Chen photographed each grave marker while Tom documented the site's relationship to the main crash location. The burial ground's position suggested it had been chosen for concealment, while remaining accessible to those who knew its location. The most significant discovery came when Patricia's team found a buried metal container at the head of the unmarked grave. Inside the waterproof container was a collection of personal effects and documentation that provided disturbing insights into the true casualties of Operation Nightfall. "Tom, this container holds German identification papers for Dr. Hans Müller, but they're found at the grave marked Klaus Müller," Patricia said, examining the documents carefully. "It appears the German scientists were buried under false names." Dr. Chen translated additional German documents from the container. These papers include a letter from Dr. Müller to his family, written just before the mission. He knew he might not survive, and he wanted his family to understand that he was trying to prevent his research from falling into the wrong hands. Tom found American military documents in the container that painted an even more complex picture. "Dr. Chen, Patricia, these orders show that the burial detail was composed of both American and German personnel. The graves were prepared jointly by former enemies. The documents revealed that the burial ceremony had been conducted according to both American military and German academic traditions, suggesting a level of mutual respect that transcended wartime animosity. Patricia discovered forensic evidence that supported the documentary record. The burial techniques used here combine American military protocols with German cultural practices. Someone wanted to ensure these individuals received honor appropriate to both their service and their heritage. The final revelation came when Tom found a sealed envelope attached to the bottom of the metal container. Inside was a detailed map showing the locations of similar burial sites across the American West, each marked with coordinates and brief descriptions of the individuals interred there. "Dr. Chen, Patricia, this map shows 12 other locations where participants in classified operations were buried under false identities during the final months of World War II. Dr. Chen studied the map with academic fascination and personal sorrow. "Tom, this suggests Operation Nightfall was just one of many intelligence operations that resulted in secret burials of foreign nationals on American soil." Patricia realized they had uncovered evidence of a systematic program for concealing the deaths of individuals involved in classified wartime operations. "Tom, Dr. Chen, the level of organization and ongoing maintenance suggests this burial program had official sanction and long-term funding. The map included notations indicating which sites contained German scientists, which held other foreign nationals, and which contained American personnel who had died during classified operations. The scope of the program was staggering. Tom thought about Agent Holmes's insistence on maintaining secrecy around their discovery. "Dr. Chen, Patricia, if there are 12 other sites like this one, Then our discovery threatens to expose a much larger program of concealed military operations. Dr. Chen found additional documentation in the container that provided context for the burial program. Tom, these records show that the secret burial sites were intended as temporary measures until political conditions allowed for proper recognition and repatriation of remains. Patricia examined the evidence of ongoing maintenance around the graves. But the political conditions never changed enough to allow disclosure, so these temporary burials became permanent secret cemeteries. The implications were profound. They had discovered not just the crash site of aircraft 44-32892, but evidence of a comprehensive program for concealing the human costs of classified wartime operations. Tom looked at the neat rows of grave markers, each representing someone whose death had been hidden from history for 8 decades. Dr. Chen, Patricia, these people died serving their countries, but their sacrifice was never acknowledged because their missions were too sensitive to reveal. Dr. Chen nodded gravely, and their families spent decades not knowing what happened to their loved ones, unable to mourn properly or understand the circumstances of their deaths. Patricia carefully resealed the documentation and prepared to preserve the burial site while continuing their investigation. Dr. Chen, what we've found here transforms this from a story about a crashed aircraft into a story about the hidden human costs of intelligence, operations that shaped the modern world. The demolition charges were sophisticated, military-grade explosives designed to obliterate evidence rather than simply destroy structures. Patricia discovered them during a routine perimeter check, hidden beneath camouflage tarps and positioned at strategic points around both the crash site and the secret cemetery. Tom, Dr. Chen, these aren't old ordnance from the 1940s, Patricia said, examining the devices with the expertise of someone who had worked on military archaeological sites. These charges were placed recently, probably within the last 72 hours. Tom studied the timer mechanisms with growing alarm. Patricia, how much damage would these explosives cause? Tom, these charges are positioned to create overlapping blast patterns that would completely destroy the aircraft wreckage, obliterate the burial sites, and eliminate any trace evidence of our excavations. Nothing would survive. Dr. Chen found additional charges positioned along the access routes to the site. They're not just planning to destroy the evidence, they're planning to make it look like a natural disaster or accidental explosion. The sophistication of the demolition plan suggested professional military involvement rather than the hasty cover-up Tom had initially feared. Someone had invested significant time and resources in developing a comprehensive evidence destruction strategy. Patricia used her archaeological photography equipment to document each charge location while carefully avoiding any disturbance that might trigger premature detonation. Tom, Dr. Chen, whoever placed these charges, has intimate knowledge of explosive archaeology. They know exactly how to eliminate historical evidence without leaving obvious signs of intentional destruction. Tom's satellite phone rang, the caller ID showing Agent Holmes. He answered with the speaker function activated so his colleagues could hear. "Mr. Bradley, I trust you and your associates have had sufficient time to reconsider your position regarding the crash site materials." Agent Holmes, we've discovered demolition charges positioned around the site. Are you planning to destroy evidence of Operation Nightfall? A pause, longer than Agent Holmes probably intended. "Mr. Bradley, those devices are protective measures designed to prevent unauthorized access to potentially hazardous materials." Dr. Chen leaned toward the phone. "Agent Holmes, these charges are positioned to destroy archaeological evidence, not to protect public safety. They would obliterate historical artifacts that belong in academic archives." Dr. Chen, those artifacts represent national security materials that cannot be allowed to fall into unauthorized hands. The protective measures you've discovered are standard protocols for safeguarding classified materials. Patricia joined the conversation with professional authority. "Agent Holmes, I'm Dr. Patricia Reynolds, and I can tell you that these demolition charges would destroy irreplaceable historical evidence. There are proper archaeological methods for preserving sensitive materials. Dr. Reynolds, national security considerations supersede archaeological interests. The materials found a disturbing addendum to the presidential order that had been added by hand in what appeared to be Roosevelt's own writing. Tom Jen, this handwritten note says that the atomic weapon carried aboard aircraft 4430-89-2 was a prototype device that was never officially reported to Congress or military leadership. Dr. Chen studied the handwritten edition with academic fascination and personal horror. Patricia, Tom, Roosevelt is confirming that Operation Nightfall involved a nuclear weapon that existed outside all official records and oversight. Tom realized they had uncovered evidence that the President of the United States had authorized the development and deployment of nuclear weapons without informing Congress or the American people. Patricia, this presidential order doesn't just authorize Operation Nightfall, it authorizes the creation of a secret nuclear weapons program that operated parallel to the official Manhattan Project. The implications were staggering. They had discovered evidence that President Roosevelt had established secret institutional structures for managing nuclear weapons and intelligence operations that had apparently continued operating for 8 decades without democratic oversight. Patricia carefully photographed every page of the presidential order while Tom and Dr. Chen processed the implications of their discovery. Tom, Chen, this document proves that some of America's most important national security decisions have been made by unelected officials operating under authorities granted in 1944. Dr. Chen looked at the demolition charges positioned around the site. Tom, Patricia, now I understand why the government is so determined to destroy this evidence. The presidential order doesn't just reveal wartime secrets, it reveals that American democracy has been operating under emergency powers for 8 decades. Tom thought about the oversight committee that Roosevelt had established and wondered how many critical decisions affecting American security and foreign policy had been made by officials whose authority derived from a 1944 presidential order that had never been rescinded or reviewed. Patricia, if we are right about the continuing authority of Roosevelt's Oversight Committee, then our discovery threatens not just historical secrets, but the constitutional foundation of how America has been governed since World War II. The live television broadcast began at 5:47 a.m., just 13 minutes before the demolition charges were scheduled to detonate. CNN's field reporter had arrived with a satellite truck after Rebecca Martinez contacted national media outlets with Tom's story and the evidence of planned evidence destruction. This is Jessica Chen reporting live from the remote Montana location, where a weekend hiker's discovery has escalated into a confrontation over government secrecy and historical truth. The reporter announced as her camera crew positioned equipment to capture both the crash site and the hidden explosive charges. Tom stood before the cameras with Dr. Chen and Patricia, holding copies of the presidential order and other evidence they had documented through the night. Behind them, federal agents maintained their perimeter, but appeared uncertain about how to proceed with television cameras broadcasting their activities to a national audience. Mr. Bradley, can you explain why you believe the government is planning to destroy historical evidence? Jessica Chen asked, her professional demeanor barely concealing her excitement at covering such a significant story. Tom held up photographs of the demolition charges. Miss Chen, we discovered military-grade explosives positioned around this site, set to detonate at sunrise. These charges would completely destroy aircraft wreckage and burial sites that contain evidence of classified World War II operations. Dr. Chen stepped forward with the presidential order they had discovered. Jessica, we found documentation proving that this site contains evidence of operations authorized directly by President Roosevelt in 1944. Operations that established secret government structures that may still be operating today. The live broadcast created an immediate crisis for the federal agents attempting to manage the situation. Agent Holmes appeared on camera, clearly uncomfortable with the national attention but forced to respond to direct questions about the planned demolition. Agent Holmes, can you confirm that federal agents have placed explosives around this historical site? Jessica Chen asked, thrusting her microphone toward the clearly reluctant federal official. Ms. Chen, federal authorities are implementing standard safety protocols for sites containing potentially hazardous materials. The measures you've observed are designed to protect public safety. Patricia joined the interview with archaeological authority. Agent Holmes is an expert in military archaeology. I can confirm that these explosives are positioned to destroy historical evidence, not to protect public safety. They would obliterate irreplaceable artifacts that belong in museums and archives. The television coverage captured federal agents removing the explosive charges in real time, their demolition plan obviously abandoned due to the media attention. Viewers across the country watched as evidence that had been scheduled for destruction was instead preserved under the protection of live television coverage. Tom realized that the broadcast had fundamentally changed the dynamics of their situation. Jessica, what we've discovered here involves secret government operations that have shaped American policy for 8 decades. The American people deserve to know about decisions made in their name. Dr. Chen used the national platform to present their historical findings. Jessica, the documents we've found prove that some of the most important decisions about nuclear weapons and intelligence operations were made by officials operating under emergency authorities granted in 1944 that were never reviewed by Congress. The interview was interrupted when Tom's satellite phone rang with a call from Walter Kowalski at the nursing home. Jessica, Chen's cameras captured both sides of the conversation as the 94-year-old veteran provided live testimony about Jimmy Morrison's letter and the sacrifice of the aircraft crew. Miss Bradley, I've been watching your interview on television. Walter's voice carried clearly through the speakerphone. I want the American people to know that Jimmy Morrison and his crew died as heroes, protecting secrets that they believed would keep America safe. Jessica Chen seized the opportunity for dramatic television. Mr. Kowalski, you've kept Lieutenant Morrison's letter secret for nearly 80 years. Why are you speaking out now? Miss M, because Jimmy Morrison asked me to preserve his story until someone found his aircraft. Mr. Bradley and his colleagues have found that aircraft, and now the world needs to know what really happened. The live broadcast reached a climax when Dr. Cantwell called in from his retirement community, providing televised testimony about his role in the Manhattan Project and his knowledge of Operation Nightfall. Hartwell, you're admitting on national television that you participated in unauthorized nuclear weapons operations during World War II. Jessica Chen said, recognizing the historical significance of his confession. Miss Chen, I'm 96 years old, and I've carried the guilt of Operation Nightfall for nearly 8 decades. The American people deserve to know that some government officials were conducting nuclear weapons operations without proper authorization, and that those operations established secret structures that may still be affecting government decisions today. The television coverage transformed the story from a regional news item into a national controversy about government accountability and historical truth. Social media amplified the broadcast, with millions of Americans demanding answers about secret government operations and unaccounted nuclear weapons. Agent Holmes faced increasingly aggressive questions from Jessica Chen about the constitutional authority for maintaining 80-year-old emergency powers. Agent Holmes, do you have legal authority to destroy historical evidence based on emergency powers granted in 9? Chen, national security operations are conducted under legal authorities that are reviewed and validated by appropriate oversight bodies. Agent Holmes, what oversight bodies review authorities granted by President Roosevelt in 9? Has Congress ever been informed about the continuing operation of Roosevelt's secret oversight committee? Agent Holmes's inability to answer basic questions about constitutional authority for their actions became a central focus of the broadcast, highlighting the fundamental issues of democratic accountability raised by Tom's discovery. The live coverage prevented the planned destruction of evidence, while simultaneously creating public pressure for government officials to explain how emergency powers granted during World War II had continued operating without democratic oversight for 8 decades. Tom watched federal agents retreating from the site as television coverage made their position untenable. Dr. Chen: Patricia, I think we've succeeded in preserving the truth about Operation Nightfall. Dr. Chen looked at the cameras, still broadcasting their story to millions of Americans. Tom, we've done more than preserve the truth about one operation. We've raised fundamental questions about how American democracy has been functioning since 1944. Patricia surveyed the crash site, now protected by media attention, rather than threatened by government destruction. Tom, Chen, what started as a weekend hike has become a constant crisis about the balance between national security and democratic accountability. The congressional hearing room was packed beyond capacity, with overflow crowds watching on monitors in adjacent chambers. Chairman Robert Sullivan of the House Intelligence Committee gave the session to order as Tom Bradley, Dr. Sarah Chen and Dr. Patricia Reynolds took their seats at the witness table, flanked by constitutional lawyers and military historians. This hearing will examine allegations of unauthorized government operations dating to World War II and their potential impact on current constitutional governance, Chairman Sullivan announced. The committee will investigate claims that secret authorities established in 1944 have continued operating without congressional oversight. Tom felt the weight of history as he raised his right hand to be sworn in alongside his colleagues. 3 months had passed since their live television broadcast had prevented the destruction of the Operation Nightfall evidence, but the political earthquake was still reverberating through Washington. Bradley, please describe for the committee how you discovered the aircraft wreckage and what you found there, Chairman Sullivan requested, his tone suggesting he understood the historical significance of the testimony about to be presented. Tom recounted his weekend hike with Rex, the discovery of the aircraft, and the rapid federal response that had immediately classified the site. Chairman, what struck me most was how quickly federal agents arrived and how familiar they seemed with the location, as if they had been monitoring the site for decades. Chen presented her 17 years of research into Operation Nightfall, providing the committee with documented evidence of unauthorized intelligence operations and secret agreements between American and German officials during the final months of World War II. Chen, your research suggests that some wartime operations were conducted without proper authorization from Congress or even full presidential oversight. Committee member Patricia Davis observed, you explain the constitutional implications of those findings. Congresswoman Davis, Operation Nightfall appears to have been authorized under emergency powers that created permanent secret structures operating outside normal constitutional oversight. If those structures continue to exist, they represent a fundamental challenge to democratic governance. The hearing's most dramatic moment came when Dr. Eugene Hartwell, now 97, testified via video link from his retirement community. His confession about participating in unauthorized nuclear weapons operations stunned the committee and the national television audience. Dr. Hartwell, you're testifying under oath that you participated in the development and transportation of nuclear weapons that were never reported to Congress. Chairman Sullivan said, his voice reflecting the gravity of the admission. Chairman, I helped prepare uranium samples for Operation Nightfall, believing I was serving my country's interests. I later learned that the operation had created secret authorities that bypassed normal government oversight. At my age, I'm more concerned about historical truth than personal consequences. Patricia's archaeological testimony provided physical evidence that supported the documentary claims about secret burial sites and ongoing government monitoring of classified locations. Reynolds, your excavations revealed evidence of systematic concealment of military casualties and ongoing maintenance of secret burial sites. Committee member James Harrison noted, what does this suggest about the scope of operations that have remained classified? Congressman Harrison, the evidence suggests a comprehensive program for concealing the human costs of intelligence operations, with maintenance protocols that have continued for 8 decades. This level of organization requires substantial funding and institutional continuity that transcends individual administrations. The committee's most challenging witness was Agent Patricia Holmes, compelled to testify under congressional subpoena about her agency's response to Tom's discovery and the planned destruction of evidence. Agent Holmes, can you explain the legal authority for placing Lislan charges around a historical site containing evidence of government operations? Chairman Sullivan asked with prosecutorial intensity. Mr. Chairman, our actions were taken under national security authorities that protect ongoing intelligence operations and methods. Agent Holmes, what specific legal statute authorizes the destruction of historical evidence, and who has oversight authority over decisions to eliminate documentation of government operations? Agent Holmes's inability to cite specific legal authorities for her actions became a central focus of the committee's investigation, highlighting the constitutional vacuum in which many intelligence operations appeared to function. The hearing's turning point came when the committee's constitutional law expert, Professor Michael Chen, presented his analysis of the presidential order discovered at the crash site. Professor Chen, in your expert opinion, does President Roosevelt's 1944 emergency order provide continuing legal authority for secret government operations? Chairman Sullivan inquired. Mr. Chairman, the 1944 order purports to establish permanent authorities that operate outside constitutional checks and balances. Such authorities would require ongoing legislative validation to remain constitutional, but no evidence suggests Congress has ever reviewed or reauthorized these powers. Committee member Davis pressed for clarification about current government operations. Professor Chen, if the Oversight Committee established by Roosevelt's order continues to operate, what decisions might they be making without congressional knowledge? Congresswoman Davis, based on the evidence presented to this committee, the Secret Oversight Committee could potentially be making decisions about nuclear weapons, intelligence operations, and international agreements that affect fundamental American interests, without any democratic accountability. The hearing concluded with Chairman Sullivan announcing the committee's intention to investigate all 12 burial sites identified in the Operation Nightfall documentation, and to demand a full accounting of any government operations conducted under authorities dating to World War II. The evidence presented to this committee suggests that significant government operations have been conducted outside constitutional oversight for 8 decades. Chairman Sullivan declared, "This committee will not allow unaccountable secret authorities to continue operating in a democratic society." Tom watched the committee members file out of the hearing room, knowing that their weekend discovery had triggered a fundamental examination of how American government had actually been functioning since 9. Chen gathered her research materials with the satisfaction of a historian who had helped expose one of the most significant government secrets in American history. Tom, Patricia, what we've accomplished here goes far beyond preserving the memory of Jimmy Morrison's crew. We've forced a constitutional reckoning with 80 years of secret government operations. Patricia looked at the packed hearing room, filled with journalists, historians, and citizens who had followed their story from a small-town newspaper article to congressional testimony. Tom, Chen, I think we've honored the sacrifice of everyone who died at that crash site by ensuring their story finally contributed to government accountability. Tom thought about Rex, whose curiosity during a routine hike had uncovered secrets that challenged the constitutional foundation of American government. Dr. Chen, Patricia, I just hope that Jimmy Morrison and his crew would be proud of what their sacrifice has ultimately accomplished. The memorial monument stood 20 feet tall, crafted from Montana granite and bronze, positioned at the exact location where Rex had first begun digging on that October morning 2 years earlier. The inscription was simple but profound. In memory of Lieutenant James Morrison and crew, and all who gave their lives protecting America's secrets. Their sacrifice preserved freedom. Their story preserves democracy. Tom stood before the monument with Helen at his side, Rex panting contentedly at their feet. The golden retriever had become something of a celebrity, appearing on television programs and magazine covers as the dog who changed history, but he remained blissfully unaware of his fame, content to chase tennis balls and explore hiking trails. The dedication ceremony had drawn hundreds of people. Veterans from multiple wars, historians from universities across the country, journalists who had followed the story from its beginning, and ordinary citizens who understood that democracy required vigilance and transparency. Sarah Chen approached the podium with the measured dignity of someone who had spent 2 years transforming from an academic researcher into a nationally recognized advocate for government accountability. Her investigation into Operation Nightfall had expanded into a comprehensive examination of classified operations that had shaped American history for 8 decades. When Tom Bradley and Rex discovered aircraft 4430 OD-92, they uncovered more than the wreckage of a forgotten mission, Chen told the assembled crowd. They exposed the tension between necessary secrecy and democratic accountability that continues to challenge our republic. The congressional investigation that followed their testimony had resulted in the declassification of hundreds of previously secret documents, revealing the scope of operations conducted under Roosevelt's 1944 emergency authorities. While some information remained classified for legitimate national security reasons, the principle of democratic oversight had been re-established. Patricia Reynolds had been appointed to head a new federal commission tasked with reviewing historical sites that might contain evidence of classified operations. Her work had led to the discovery and proper memorialization of 7 additional burial sites, ensuring that the sacrifice of personnel involved in secret operations would no longer be hidden from history. The men and women memorialized here died protecting secrets that they believed would preserve American freedom. Patricia said during her remarks, "Today we honor their sacrifice, while affirming that in a democracy, secrecy must always be balanced with accountability." Walter Kowalski had not lived to see the memorial dedication, passing away peacefully 6 months after his congressional testimony. But his great-granddaughter read from Jimmy Morrison's letter during the ceremony, ensuring that the pilot's final words continued to bear witness to the complexity of service and sacrifice. Jimmy Morrison wrote that he hoped someone would eventually find his aircraft and understand the difficult choices made by people who loved their country enough to die for it. She read, "Today we fulfill his hope while learning from the questions his sacrifice raises about how democracies should balance security with transparency." Dr. Eugene Hartwell, now 98, attended the ceremony in a wheelchair, his mind still sharp, despite his physical frailty. His testimony had provided crucial validation for the Operation Nightfall revelations, and his decision to break 8 decades of silence had inspired other former government officials to reveal information about historical operations. Hartwell's courage in speaking the truth about Operation Nightfall proved that loyalty to country sometimes requires challenging government decisions. Tom said as he helped the elderly physicist place a wreath at the memorial. His example shows that patriotism and accountability are not contradictory values. The memorial also honored the German scientists who had died in the crash, acknowledging their complex roles as both enemies and eventual contributors to American scientific advancement. Dr. Hans Müller and Dr. Werner Schmidt were recognized as individuals whose knowledge had been sought by multiple governments and whose deaths had been concealed for political reasons. Rex seemed to understand the solemnity of the occasion, sitting quietly beside the memorial as speakers recounted the story of his discovery. Occasionally he would look up at Tom with the patient expression of a dog who knew that humans needed more time than animals to process important events. The ceremony concluded with the unveiling of a second monument, positioned near the secret cemetery where Patricia's team had discovered the burial sites. This memorial honored all personnel, regardless of nationality, who had died during classified operations, and whose families had been denied the opportunity to mourn properly. Tom reflected on how much had changed since that October morning when he had simply wanted to enjoy a peaceful hike with his dog. The discovery had cost him his quiet retirement, but had given him a sense of purpose he had never expected to find. "I often think about the randomness of discovery," Tom told the crowd, during his closing remarks. If Rex had chosen to investigate a different scent, if we had taken a different trail, if the weather had been different that day, Operation Nightfall might have remained buried forever. Sometimes democracy depends on accidents. Dr. Chen had established a research foundation dedicated to investigating historical government operations and ensuring that the lessons of Operation Nightfall informed contemporary discussions about transparency and accountability. Her work continued to reveal previously unknown aspects of how American foreign policy and intelligence operations had evolved during the Cold War. As the ceremony ended and the crowd began to disperse, Tom walked the short distance to the actual crash site, now preserved as a historical landmark. The aircraft wreckage remained partially exposed, protected by a climate-controlled shelter that allowed visitors to see the physical evidence of Operation Nightfall while preserving the artifacts for future study. The site had become a pilgrimage destination for people interested in the intersection of history, democracy, and government accountability. School groups toured the facility regularly, learning about the complex challenges of balancing national security with democratic values. Tom sat on a bench near the crash site, Rex settling beside him with the contentment of a dog who had found his favorite resting spot. The Montana mountains stretched out before them, holding who knew how many other secrets waiting to be discovered by curious hikers and their equally curious dogs. Helen joined them on the bench, carrying a thermos of coffee and the peaceful expression of someone who had watched her husband find unexpected purpose in their retirement years. "Tom, do you ever regret that weekend hike?" Tom scratched Rex behind the ears, thinking about Jimmy Morrison's crew, Dr. Hartwell's courage, Walter Kowalski's faithfulness, and all the people whose wows had been touched by their discovery. "Helen, I think some discoveries choose us rather than the other way around. Rex and I were just fortunate enough to be in the right place when history was ready to reveal its secrets." Rex wagged his tail and looked toward the hiking trail, always ready for the next adventure. Some dogs chased tennis balls, some discovered buried aircraft that changed the course of American democracy. Both seemed equally worthwhile to a golden retriever who understood that the best discoveries often came when you were simply following your nose.